Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Horrific Chat. In this segment, we talk to various creators, discuss their latest projects, motivations, inspirations, and journey into horror. Tonight, I'm joined by Anthony M. Caro, author and horror reviewer. Good evening, Anthony, and welcome. How is life treating you?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. I'm happy to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Always a pleasure, and Facebook's just broken. Fantastic. Why are you doing that? I love going live. And we're might be back with Facebook. Okay. Sorry,
So we're
Facebook, if you
back.
missed this. It seems to be we stream simultaneously to different platforms,
Oh, okay.
and there's always one decides I'm not playing tonight. I'm gonna break on you. Just you go live,
There you go.
but that's all part of the fun. Just coming on. If this was pre-recorded, it'd be boring because people
Ah,
people get more enjoyment laughing out of me having technical difficulties than actually watching the show.
never know
But
what's going to happen.
yeah, it's all good. So, you're a bit of a double hat. You're a creator yourself, writer. Obviously, it was through the slasher app we got in touch with each other, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
On Slasher TV. Yes.
Yeah, slasher. I had Damon on, the creator, last month actually,
Cool. Yeah.
and we were talking about censorship in horror, and how
Hmm.
it's uh all these trigger words and warnings, and if you dare like horror, you're a weirdo. We know the like the old '80s type stuff. Just
Yeah.
sort
I
of
mean,
resurfaces head again and again.
yeah, I remember a time where the more absurd or over the top or graphic your advertisement was, the I don't want to say the better, but nobody cared. Like if you remember, well, I can't even remember it because it was before I was born. But 1969, Mark of the Devil had a brutal poster that it was replicated in the newspapers, and pretty brutal ad. And at that time, it just went over people's head. It was like, it's a horror movie. Who cares? You know?
Yeah, but now we're getting people are they want to shut horror down. I don't know. I think there's something about it as
Nah,
annoys people, and it's like, go away.
I got a different take on that.
All right, okay.
I used to I'm a professional writer by trade, and a
Mhm.
lot of my writing, marketing or promotional marketing, advertising, and all that. And a lot of companies, they don't want to get knocked off their focus. And if something becomes controversial and becomes a distraction or it becomes a money drain, they're out. And sometimes if a horror movie or any type of movie starts to become a little too controversial and somebody can't turn around and defend it, they just drop it or they back away from it. And that's one of the reasons why you'll see projects run into censorship issues. A lot of times it's a money and a public relations issues for some of the partners they get involved with.
Yeah, it's a bland
And
corporatization. Everything has to be grey and safe and suitable for everybody, and it's like horror has never been about that.
well, Amazon Prime has Terrifier uncut on part of its. Oh gosh, I can't remember, but it's the subscription platform. I think you can watch it for free if you're a Prime subscriber.
Hmm.
So somebody at Amazon didn't see a problem with that movie, and that movie's way over the top.
Oh
So,
yeah. Sequel, not so much.
well, the sequel made so much money that people are going to look the other way at the controversy. They want to tap into whatever dollars they can get out of that.
Yeah, no, it's just a bit. We've talked about this before, it was but just a bit too long, a bit too explaining.
2
Like,
hours and 18 minutes, I think it
I was
was. I didn't
tired.
see the sequel.
All right, I was tired at the last quarter, the final act. I was like, is it
208,
ever gonna end? Are we ever gonna
200.
get a?
Other than The Exorcist, I can't think of a horror movie that can run 2 hours, much less something that can run longer. I mean, 90 minutes, that's a good pace because
Mhm.
you want to pace a horror movie really well. Um, you want you never want people to be bored. Like in the old days, a lot of people don't understand, or they were never learned about the way that a lot of the old exploitation horror movies were made. And a lot of times when they would write these things, you know, they would they would think of showstopper scenes. Like if you watch Zombie has the crazy scene where a zombie attacks a shark. And you got to remember when people saw a lot of these movies way back when, they were watching double bills, they were watching triple bills, and you had relatively short movies. And people would just, they would doze off in the theater, or they weren't really paying attention, or even if they watched, horror movies on TV, they'd be doing other things. And then you'd have this crazy shock scene that would come up, and that would capture everybody's attention, and that's what people would remember, and that's where the word of mouth about the film
Mhm.
would carry. So if you had those one, two, or three showstopper scenes or memorable scenes in a horror movie, that actually helped sell them. And I think that when people do a horror movie and they try to they don't pare it back, or they don't pare it back in the editing, you can have a very a dull movie. A drama you can drag out. People be more willing to. They're not going with the expectation of a certain pace.
Yeah.
And when the pace of a horror movie slows down, oh boy, because you got to remember, horror movies by their nature have a lot of logic flaws. Um,
Oh yeah, yeah, but we're very forgiving audience, aren't we? Of a lot of it.
you can forgive it when it moves fast, because
Hmm.
whatever didn't make sense, you went right past it into something else. When the time duration's really long and it's a long film, oh, some of the flaws are going to stick out a bit more. So remember, a lot of horror movies low budget, and a lot of beg, borrowing, and stealing, and sometimes you got to hide your limitations. And moving a faster pace helps with that. A slower pace, it can hurt. But then again, I mean, with Terrifier made 15 million bucks, so which was a stunner. But yeah, but that's been the criticism about that film. It's long, you know.
Yeah. I think. Well, obviously we did a whole deep dive into the entire, from the Ninth Circle onward, the whole Art to Clown, storyboard so far.
Hmm.
Um. Yeah, I think Damon Leone should have had somebody just in his ear, not censoring him or editing, but just saying, yeah, put it back here a bit too much. It's a great idea. Maybe keep that on the shelf for something else. Like I thought the whole clown cafe scene should have been. They should have been YouTube shorts or promo videos, not actually part of the movie, because it
Mm.
didn't add
I
anything.
Yeah, that's what happens. It's Easy Rider. I think the rough cut for Easy Rider was 4 hours. The movie that was released was 90 minutes. I mean, sometimes you just have to pare things back in the editing process, and
Hmm.
that goes with books too. Sometimes your books are a little too long, and the chapters have to come out. Dracula's Guest, the short story, that was Stoker removed that from the novel because it killed the pace. So, sometimes you have to, just trying to just get everything into something can work against you. Sometimes you have to take things out, or you have to speed it up.
Hmm. Yeah, because that's something else. Apart from being a writer, you are a movie as a horror reviewer or horror blogger. What would be the correct term? Because you do it for horrornews.net. Um, Quite a few articles on there.
Yeah, I would not, and definitely not a reviewer.
Yeah.
Reviewing is about liking or disliking, and I don't get into that. I kind of get more into what used to be called film criticism, which people don't like to use that term because you hear criticism, you think that like or dislike.
Yeah.
More or less more of an analyst, or I think a nice term that people use is creative nonfiction. I think that kind of tells you really what you're getting. You're getting a nonfiction piece that is taking a different angle on things. Like I remember I did not a review of Death Dream, which is a great film, Bob Clark's great film. Um, and I noticed I had watched it. I had gotten the Blu-ray about a week after I had watched The Graduate for the first time, and I started noticing some overflow between two very dissimilar movies. So I would write about how they kind of played off each other. Manchester or Living Dead at Manchester Morgue. I remember when I did a piece on that. What I noticed about that film is that it was very much the subtext was a generation gap theme, and how that everybody's arguing and fighting with one another and nobody's listening. So I kind of focused on how the characters are not communicating, and that was actually the title of the piece, "Failure to Communicate at Manchester Morgue." So these weren't your standard review, like it, dislike it.
Mhm.
stuff. It was just, I kind of tried to go out in left field with it. So
So when did this all sort of begin? Was it? Did you feel like you had to maybe do something different as opposed to the standard review, or was it just your mind, your thought process when you watched the movie and you wanted to talk about it?
I couldn't write a review because it would bore me, and
Mm-hmm.
honestly, who cares if whether I liked it or not? I mean, I like reviews that are informative, but if you go on Rotten Tomatoes or something, you read 10 reviews, you're really reading the same thing, because you'll notice if you have a negative review, everybody will point the same flaws out. Usually, it's so review writing to me was always kind of boring. I had an appreciation for um, an old magazine called Films and Review. Although Films and Review might still be in publication, but I used to read some of the old issues. I got a copy of some back issues, and I started writing that type of film criticism a long time ago for in magazines, newsstand magazines. Not prolific, like maybe one or two a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of like doing that stuff because it was exciting to me. Like if I can't, I have to invest, like I have to invest time in that stuff, and I have to invest time writing it and editing it and putting it together. And if it's not something that really excites me or appeals to me, then it's not going to be something that excites or appeals to the reader. And I never wanted to just put out, for lack of a better word, just generic stuff,
Yeah,
like
well,
a
actually, we see
generic.
a lot of this today. Bloggers, that actually write for websites, they're more there just are their own personal opinions about life, and they might happen to mention the particular movie or book, but they're not really about that. They're just trying to say the right words, get noticed by a big corporation to get their real job. The ones that annoy me are the ones that come into horror and they're not really horror fans, but they think, I'll start off low. This is easy,
Yeah,
and they just put out absolute trite and gobbledygook and not actually anything about the particular movie. And
yeah,
it just clogs up. If somebody's wanting to get an opinion on a movie or see if somebody agrees with them, or was I thinking that way? Is somebody else thinking that, or try to formulate the thoughts? That's usually where somebody will go to a review.
yeah. I mean, reviews are helpful. I mean, reviews will tell
Mm-hmm.
you, it'll give you an insight, but and I kind of think when you get a collective opinion, like I said, like when 20 different reviewers point out the same things, that kind of gives you pretty solid insight into what the
Mm-hmm.
movie's about.
Like
Doesn't necessarily.
I read your review on Theater of Blood, which I had
Ah,
covered a couple of weeks ago, and it was
yes.
what you put in there, because what I do is I go live as soon as after the watching the movie as I can, because I'm trying to give the impression, basically talking to my mates, I've just watched the movie. Here's my first thoughts, that sort of vibe. But it was interesting the way you were talking about the review critics and how they were the gatekeepers, and that's what I had. That was the impression of the characters,
Yeah, the Theater
and
of Blood. That was one of two movies that I saw with Vincent Price, and I saw
mhm,
them on television before seeing them in the theater. I saw House of Wax and I saw Theater of Blood uh, on TV, syndicated television, and then I saw House of Wax in the re-release when Warner re-released it during the 3D craze. And I saw Theater of Blood, a special screening at Stony Brook University in New York, and that was the uncut version on 16 millimeter, and that kind of took me aback. And that was, whoa boy, that you're going back now 30 years.
oh yeah, that's 1973.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. The movie came out in '73, and I saw it in the screening in '94 ish. Um, what had happened was I had an idea to write about Theater of Blood for
Mm-hmm.
several years. I mean, maybe 5 or 6 years, but nothing really came to me. And then it came out on Blu-ray. I ordered the Blu-ray, and I said, let me actually try to work something out with this. And that is a really great film, and that did really well at the box office when it came out. Vincent Price, I mean, not Steve McQueen level box office, but he was delivering some solid hits. Like I didn't see the final tally, but I saw that Theater of Blood had pulled, while in release, an excerpt from Variety was about $750,000, which is pretty good because $1 million for a horror movie at the box office in those days was pretty good. And if you
Mm-hmm.
could exceed $1 million, that was even better. But that also, people say, well, how can $1 million be the big hit? And a lot of those were pre-sold. And I don't know the deal with Theater of Blood, but a lot of American International Pictures, a lot of Hammer films, like, well, Hammer would pitch to their distributor an idea. It could be Warner Brothers, could be somebody else, and somebody there would say, you know what, that idea sounds like we're going to make about $1 million on it. That's the ceiling. We don't see ourselves making any more than that, so we'll give you $400,000 towards it. And the film hasn't been made, but now they got 400,000 from Warner Brothers, and then they'll go to another company in another country here, there, and they'll basically pre-sell a movie. I mean, that was a Hammer approach. That was a Canon Pictures. Canon used to pre-sell everything. They would
Hmm.
pre-sell these Chuck Norris and Bronson movies just on we got Bronson and here's the name of the movie. Sometimes they didn't even have a plot, and they could go
Just
and
insert.
they could and they could raise millions, because Bronson and Norris never lost money for Ken. So did it really? Unless it was something really off the wall, where they're like, no, we don't want that. But if it was a decent action or a decent plot, oh yeah, they could pre-sell, and that was the same with a lot of the established companies. Other people, indies, they would have to go out like Friday the 13th, where they spend. I think that was $250,000 they spent, but they lucked out. They sold it for $4 million because Paramount they wanted something that like Halloween, and they got it, and they got the same box office that Halloween got. In fact, they might have made out better than Universal did. I think. I think, yeah, I would say Paramount did better than Universal did. I think Friday the 13th made more money for them than Universal made off of Halloween. So, but I'm not sure.
I think Friday the 13th came out the better franchise because it didn't stray too far from its original premise. It was a bit wobbly the first three movies, no trying to establish, but once it got okay, this is Jason, this is his look. It never really looked back. Halloween's kind of went all over the place.
Yeah, because it's had so many different people involved with it. I mean, you had Carpenter directly involved for two movies, first two, third's a great movie, but I don't count it. And then the next, when they resurrected the franchise, it was basically the production company, the financiers took it over, and then it got licensed. Rob Zombie was hired on a work for hire deal, and now you get a completely different vision for two movies. Whereas with Friday the 13th, Paramount was in charge. They ran the show, and they kept it. I can't. Oh my God, Frank! I can't remember. Frank Mancuso, was that the
I'm
producer?
terrible when honestly, see trying to remember people's names, woeful. um, I always go, yeah, such and such. Who was in that? Do you remember that scene? Yeah, it was that person. Blah blah blah. Yeah, they've got a name. I know they have a name, but I just I'm a scatterbrain when it comes to that. I
Yeah.
always have respect for people who go, yeah, blah 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 blah, and I'm like, okay, right.
Yeah, one of the things I'll never forget with Friday the 13th, you're right. The first three movies were kind of an establishment.
They
The
were trying to
fourth,
figure out what it was about because it was a standalone movie, and then obviously they got the idea to make a franchise, but they didn't know what to do with Jason, and
well,
they
it's
were
like the
trying to
first,
figure that out.
the first movie was a standalone movie, and the second
Yeah.
movie was a spin-off. It had I mean, similar, but it had a different villain.
Hmm.
And then they really didn't establish the villain until the third movie.
Yeah, and
And
that's
then
what that's what I said. That's what they kind of figured out. Okay, this is going to be Jason. We can move forward with this because that
yeah,
could
then
have
they
died in its backside.
killed him off, and everybody's like, "Why'd you kill him off? Bring him back." And when they did part six, where they do the lightning striking and resurrecting him and all that, I'm saying to myself, "Oh my God, what are you people doing? Now you're getting silly." And they kept getting silly.
Yeah, but I think
So
that
that,
was part of they knew it was silly. I think it was kind of self aware. They weren't going to scare people. Nightmare on Elm Street went the same way when it got to the third one. Um, they realized we're not scaring people anymore. But what do we do? We'll have to embrace the silliness, the comedy. We'll have the wisecracks. Not in Jason's case, but you know what I mean. They had to have something to keep it going because you
yeah, you had to do so. You had to give it a gimmick. You had to get because Jason was very one dimensional, and you had to give him like with the sixth movie, now he's zombie Jason, and then they essentially had him by part seven, I think it was, with the telekinetic.
I was Jason Goes to Hell, wasn't it? Or something?
No, no, no. This
No.
is the one with the young girl who had the telekinetic powers. She's Carrie, but in all but name. So it was Jason versus Carrie, is how I always looked at it.
God, I can't
And
remember that
then,
one. It's been a
yeah,
while since I've been
I
to the
saw it.
theater.
I saw it in the theater. I saw
Hmm.
part five all the way up until I think I've seen every movie with the exception of the one in outer space because I went direct to video.
Oh,
I
yeah, that
saw them
was
all.
that was absolutely
Yeah,
bonkers
that was.
daft. That was
Yeah,
that was a parody.
I think that was a just hey, let's. I think they might have been contractually obligated to make another movie. I think it was like Hellraiser where they had to. I
Oh, to keep the
think it was their.
license. Oh, God.
Yeah, I think they had to deliver a project, so I think that they just, well, we'll spend money on this and we'll make it back on something else, So, but who knows? Those
That's
were, yeah.
fascinating. It's all the background stuff. We've been covering Clive Barker's filmography in a series, and a lot of the reasons the movies end up being absolute duds is because of the interference with the studio. Well, according to Clive Barker, anyway, it was always the studio's fault. And then you're like,
They don't.
well, when somebody else directs one of your movies, it turns out better. I'm starting to see maybe a wee bit of a pattern here. When you direct a
Yeah,
movie, not so well, but
did he direct Nightbreed?
yes.
I saw that in the theater when it came out. I liked it. I remember. I think he directed Rawhead Rex. I think that was pretty good. Um,
It's hilarious. Oh, dear.
I'm trying to remember. Did he direct any of the Hellraisers? I can't
Yeah, he
remember.
did 1 and 2.
Oh, okay. Oh, he's actually pretty well. Two I saw. Two I saw. Two I saw in a grindhouse. I saw that in an actual grindhouse in Philadelphia. I think it might have been the Duke and Duchess or maybe the Eric's Place. And boy, those theaters were dilapidated to be sure. I mean, they saw better days. So that was I remember that. Yeah. Yeah. But I enjoyed him. I like this stuff. The thing with Barker is that he's successful as a writer, but he's not selling books at the same volume as a Peter Straub or a Dean Koontz or a Stephen King. But he sells and there's interest and he's got an audience. But his style of writing is esoteric. It doesn't always translate into films. That's basically the issue. And I don't know how you would, do you make it more like an art house horror movie? I mean, yeah, you can do that. I mean, I would consider Nightbreed more of a more experimental, not overly experimental approach. But then it becomes hard to market it, and then
Well, that was the big problem when they tried to market it as a slasher. When the concept of the movie and Cabal, the book it was based on, is nothing like that at all. So
yeah,
you're
because
like,
the studio says, well, this guy makes money. Let's make a movie with him. And then they look at the movie, and he's made a movie that's basically based on the books that made money. And they're like, oh my God, what do we do? Well, we'll give it a crazy ad campaign. Like I can't reach it, but I have a copy of a great movie called Blue Collar with Richard
mhm.
Pryor and Harvey Keitel. Blue Collar is a great movie. It's a drama. And the ad campaign was comedy. They tried to sell it like it was
Because of
a
Richard
Richard
Pryor's
Pryor.
obviously
Yeah,
his
because they
background in
looked at
comedy.
it. Yeah, yeah, and they're like, oh, okay, how do we sell this very depressing drama about life as working at in an auto manufacturing plant? And they said, well, we won't. We'll just pretend it's a comedy. Well, the movie bombed because people who expected a comedy went to see it and said, well, that's not funny, or it's funny. I mean, Pryor's funny in spots, but you're not. It's not a comedy. It's a
Hmm.
drama. So you get those attempts to fool the audience, and they don't really work because the
It actually
reviews and
creates more
word of mouth.
resentment, I think.
Yeah, they're like, I don't want to see that. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what killed Halloween 3. I mean, when they, everybody was expecting Michael Myers and they didn't get him, and then they started doing a lot of promo materials with those android characters that walk like Michael, try to fool you a little bit, and it didn't work.
No, that's which is annoying because on its own, that's a decent movie. Like if had it just went
Oh
Halloween
yeah,
season of the witch, job
it's a
done.
great movie. It's a great
It's
movie.
on
It's
its
it's
own, it was
far
still a pull.
It's great. It's just not. It's not part of. It's It's a
Funny
spin-off.
enough,
I
we were
mean, the
just
whole.
talking about Tom Atkins in Night of the Creeps a couple of nights ago there, Thursday.
Oh, Near the Creeps. I remember that. Yeah.
Tom Atkins. We need a burnt out alcoholic character. Ring his agent.
Yeah, that was VHS days. I remember Night of the
Yeah.
Creeps when that came out in the '80s on VHS. Yeah, that didn't play theatrically in Philly, but it played theatrically in New York. But it didn't make its way to Philadelphia. Um,
What's the
some of
day?
the
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in
so-
there.
some of the lower budgeted movies, like from Empire or from oh geez, who was in New World? Sometimes they would find their way to Philadelphia and New Jersey, and other ones didn't. They just played in New York just to get a few screenings so that they could up their VHS sales or pre-sales or overseas sales.
Hmm.
So, but we were lucky sometimes. Sometimes we would get movies that other people only got direct to video, and you could actually see them in the theater. Like, geez, well, oh god, Steel Warrior, that was one. American Cyborg, Steel Warrior, which was a goofy ass movie that came out
God, I
in
think I
the
remember
80s.
those.
Yeah, Empire Pictures Prison, which was a great horror movie. We were able to get that in Philly in like two or three theaters. So Dolls was another one. And it was cool to see those movies when they came out in a smaller theater. They did not usually play in multiplexes, although sometimes they did. Um, but a lot of the independent theaters, when they were on their way out, like really struggling, they could get bookings on these movies, and they would try to draw, fans who might otherwise, well, couldn't see it anywhere else. It wasn't playing anywhere else. So that was a business strategy that quite honestly didn't work. I mean, the indie theaters went under. By 1989, they were gone. But it was fun to see movies in some of these theaters back in the day. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
because
was
it
an
could be a different
experience.
experience.
Oh yeah,
Do you think cinema has a future?
yeah, because sometimes you just want to get out of the house. Um, I'm lucky. I live in Hollywood, and we have a lot of revival theaters here. And you can, I mean, if I gave you a list of the movies I saw on 16 and 35 millimeter, you'd be shocked. I mean, just everything from movies from the 30s to the 90s, and there's like one, two, three, four, five revival houses that play them, and they're packed. I saw El Topo, and I got lucky to get
Hmm.
in. There were only two seats left. I got the second to last one, and some movies I couldn't even get into. I think they did Predator Friday night. This that was last night, yeah, and it was sold out. It was sold out a week in advance. So people
Are
do
they reasonably
dig that.
priced, or is it just a certain crowd?
They are generally lower priced than what you would pay for a normal movie ticket.
Hmm.
A lot, they're usually about $12. You can get a lot of them are double features too. So you like at the New Beverly or Brain Dead Studios or Secret Movie Club. They're generally really reasonable. In terms of mainstream releases, like yeah, I mean, people will go out and see like Oppenheimer, did big money, because it's something special. Um,
Well, I think it's for
a
the
mo-
first time ever that was non superhero movie, so everyone's like, "Yay, something different!"
yeah, I used to be. I mean, I love superhero movies, or I used to love them,
Oh,
but
it's just
oh my God, you've already, if you didn't see it, you already saw it, and that's the reason they're not making money. You know exactly what you're going to get, and
the poor horse is
you know,
dead and beaten over and
yeah.
over again.
And now they're doing B and C and D and Z grade characters that never sold a book. They were never top sellers, even during the heyday of comic book publishing. And I mean, if Spider-Man's selling all these books, then some of these other titles might get drawn in with the enthusiasm. And it's the same thing with the movie. When it's red hot and everybody and Superman's doing this and Batman's doing that, Spider-Man's doing that, and you release like a lesser known character like Iron Man, people will check it out. When
Mm.
it's not hot, it's hard to sell a lesser known character, or I mean they're B and C characters, for a reason. Sometimes their powers are silly, where their origins are derivative.
Or just
Like
combination, it just doesn't land.
Yeah, I got Green Arrow. Green Arrow is great. It's a great book, great character, a lot of great stuff. But Green Arrow is Batman. He's Robin Hood. They took Robin Hood and made Robin Hood Batman. That is Green Arrow.
Yeah,
That's the
just the Batman
origin
with
of Green Arrow.
wisecracks.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and then but they revamped the character in time, made him a really really interesting character in the books. But he was then
Hmm.
revamped again on TV, and pretty good too. Um,
Well, it
but
started off
that
good
is
in the end.
Yeah, but that's not a character that could ever survive in a market unless it was propped up by another character. You need Batman and Spider-Man and the X-Men to sell to sell tickets and get this stuff popular, so that then you can go to your other characters, your other library, and it's so red hot that people are going to buy it. It's like uh, you know like disco, like 40 years ago. Most there was some really good disco albums. There was a lot of garbage, but the garbage sold because it was hot and there was demand for it, and people ran with it. And then when it stops being hot, the stuff that's not so good or not so popular just
Yeah.
dies. It just
Do you think
dies
it,
really quick.
by trying to make something popular for the masses, does it do damage? I have a
You can't.
concern that horror is next on the target list now because we're starting to see more horror movies appear. The horror's always been part of cinema and always kept the doors open, but because these other franchises effectively tanked, they're now starting like, oh, horror movies sell, and then by making it more popular, they'll try and bring it into the mainstream. So then it'll,
There, horror. You can't kill horror. You can only burn it out for a little while. Um, They started making horror movies in the silent era. They made money from day one. Only time horror didn't, there were only a handful of times horror didn't make money. And you could oversaturate it as much as you wanted. Yeah, that never hurt it. What hurt horror? Well, the few things. One was the British horror ban, 1939 or so, when you couldn't
yeah,
release a
video
horror.
nasties were known as.
Oh no, this was
I was trying
long
to
before
explain to
that.
people we couldn't see stuff unless it was sneaked in, literally sneaked into the country.
Well, we're going back all the way to 1939 when
Hmm.
when the first ban, and that Universal and others just said, well, we can't get into the British market. We're not going to make any money, so let's stop making horror movies. And that ban got lifted, and horror came right back. It lasted until the atomic bomb. After the atomic bomb, science fiction became the thing. And I would say like there was like a 12-year period where horror, it was like 1945 into 1957, meh, not a lot of horror, mostly sci-fi, and some of the horror like the werewolf and Frankenstein's daughter, even I was a teenage werewolf, they bordered on sci-fi. Like I was a teenage werewolf. When you watch it, it's like it's a horror movie, but he becomes a werewolf because of a scientist's experiments. They were really moving away from supernatural horror. Then 1957, well, I was a teenage werewolf. 1957, I was a teenage Frankenstein, and then you had the shock theater package where they released the old Universals at TV. And then the other thing in '57 was Hammer. Hammer did their Dracula and Frankenstein movie, and from 1957 until 1985, 86, horror just made nothing but money, money, money. And they were releasing, if you went into Times Square in 1977, man, you might see three, four horror movies, three, four different ones playing at three, four different theaters. I mean, like headline. I mean,
Hmm.
you could have double features of old movies. So you might have 12 movies. 12 completely new movies were re-releases the same week, and they made
Yeah,
money.
funny
And then
enough, we are
the
talking
next,
about that on Thursday when I was doing Night of the Creeps because between 1985 and 1987, all the movies that come out, like you could not keep up. Even if you went the cinema every week, you were not keeping up with all the releases.
well, a very bad thing happened. It was a very good thing in some ways. What happened was you had the VHS boom, and you had 50 years of, for lack of a better word, glut. Not every horror movie, not every sci-fi movie, but enough product, old product, getting dumped on the VHS market. that it cut into interest in the new stuff and new releases. And also the drive-ins were on the way out. The on the way out. The second run theaters were on the way out. These were all the distribution venues for horror movies. And a lot of the new stuff at that time was either sequel, 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 sequel. And as you know, every time you release a sequel, the box office goes down.
Yep.
That's what anything. Excuse me, I take that back. There are anomalies to that, but traditionally, less, 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 because the quality decreased and it becomes derivative. And horror, they started playing a little bit too much with comedy, where they became horror comedy hybrids because they were kind of worried, they were kind of worried about getting slapped with X ratings, and they, they wanted to avoid controversy, so they just pumped up the humor. And then it just started dying, and then it died for a
But if you
while. But
think about the logic behind that, because horror in its form, like you said, it's kept the cinema doors open. It's filled seats the way it was. Once you start tinkering with it, the the interest goes down. So why is this strange attitude towards horror, usually from executives? Not when people enjoy it as it is. It's the thrill of the jump scares. It's the seeing the boundaries being pushed. That's what people enjoy. That. So why is there always pushback? It's when they know it's a winner, and that's what people generally enjoy it.
is it serious pushback? I mean,
We're seeing it in social media. When we're seeing serious attempts to um it's going to talk, like your own stuff, trying to get it out there and promote it. You're fighting an uphill battle because horror associated words, killer, serial killer, murder, death, all the words associated are getting banned. Even the word horror, if you advertise something's horror, it's coming up with all the warnings and uh, the algorithms pushing it down the chain. This is actually
yeah,
happening.
yeah,
Yeah,
you don't have the distribution model that you had at one time,
it's actually harder now to put horror out than it was during the VHS era.
Yeah, I mean, but the difference I think today is you might, you might be able to reach a far wider audience far cheaper. I mean, if you upload something to a stream and people buy it, you don't have all those additional costs with copying a VHS tape or packaging it or doing the original artwork
Oh yeah, when you
for
don't
it.
have product, that's even Blu-ray. You've got print and demand Blu-ray services now.
Yeah,
So much
yeah,
like books and novels, you don't have to like print 1,000 copies and have them in a warehouse and worry about can you sell them or not. At least now with the technology's great. So it's a bit strange, don't you think, that horror has
horror
more
always had
ability
its
than ever
critics.
to get everywhere, yet there seems to be a concerted effort to hold it back.
Yeah, they want to. If you can make money off it, they're going to make money off it. If it's too much trouble than it's worth, then they're going to cut you loose. That's really
Mm-hmm.
what it comes down to. I mean, horror is a always skewed young. And when I mean young, I mean young. I mean little kids used to are the reason why
Yeah,
the
9 and 10
universe.
years. I talked about that. I think I was like 7 or something when I watched my first horror movie.
Well, it's like the Universal monsters were deader than deader than deader than deader than dead, and when they released them on TV, they didn't know what to expect, and a large chunk of their audience were kids. So for the more mature horror movies, it was always teenagers. Teenagers were always a huge consumer of horror because they like thrills, and teenagers go into the movies or whatever. They don't want to watch a think piece. They want to watch an action movie. They want to watch a horror movie. They want to watch a superhero movie. So there's always going to be that market for it. But a lot of horror is exploitation because exploitation is cheap, it's easy, and it sells. And you don't have to do much to shock somebody. And that's fine when you're dealing when you're booking movies at the Duke and Duchess in Philly if it were still standing,
Mm-hmm.
or the Harris Theater if it were still standing in Times Square. Today, when you do exploitation, your partners are not Aquarius releasing. Your partners are not well, they can be Troma or some of these other companies, but you would have to find in some cases, not all, you might have to find a distributor who's willing to carry your material. And if it's controversial, you might run the risk of losing mainstream distribution. Like Netflix might be very leery about carrying certain material because it's just it's if it falls under, say, extreme horror or something like that. And my flip side to that is if your only approach to making these movies is just upping the gore content or upping the violence or trying to shock people, you're going to either people are going to be revolted, or they're going to be bored, or they're going to be revolted, and then you're going to overload them, and then they're going to become bored.
Yeah, that's what
So
happened to the whole torture porn era.
it's garbage,
It just got,
garbage,
just
garbage.
start off with maybe an interesting concept, then they just beat it to death, and you're just like, oh, good, here we go again. And every movie looked exactly the same graininess, the same color. They may as well use the same set half the times for
Yeah,
like
I mean,
10 different franchises. Like, God, I think
yeah,
that was
I mean,
would you
what
say that was the
it's
worst period of horror? Because
the
I'm
work.
of that mind. The torture
What
porn era.
I never watched that junk.
I've watched a bit, but it's quickly once
I
I saw it was that sort of vibe. Like obviously, first Hostel, Saw, watched a couple of those, and what was another
well,
couple. But I quickly just
Saw I consider one of the best horror movies of the past 25 years. I thought that was a fantastic movie
I
because
take it you're talking about the first movie, not the franchise.
the first movie was great. The third movie was great. The other ones were uneven. I think that uh, I can't say I saw a Saw movie that I would say, oh, that was terrible, except for the one in 3D. I thought that one was very disappointing. And then the reboot, I can't remember the
Is
when they
that the
tried to
book
re.
of called the Book of Saw or something like that? Weird.
Oh, no, that not the one before that. There was one in
I
between the
stopped
3D.
after I stopped after three. I don't think I even got the four because
They did.
I saw 1 to 3 a story arc come to a completion,
Yeah,
and I was happy with
and
that. And
then
then after that, I'm like, no, they're not gonna. Oh, they're ripping the backside of it. I'm done. I
well,
lost all interest. But
it was a mix of it was just a lot of flashback and backstory and formula, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But that was always a Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoon viewing for me. Like I go 4 o'clock and watch the movies and kill the afternoon. So it
how
wasn't
often
it
do you go to
wasn't.
the movie theater?
Hmm?
How often do you go to the movie theater?
I used to go a lot. This year, well, that's kind of weird. When I got back to California, I was going maybe at least once a week, and then there
Mhm.
was a period I didn't go for 8 months, and then I start and stop. But mostly I go to the revival showings. I don't really go to the newer stuff, even
Because
though
I'm
I
getting the
live.
impression you're maybe going twice a week at least. Because
Uh,
physically, to cover all this stuff, you nearly need to.
in terms of
We'll go to the revival
like.
theater or going out to
Well, like I said, I used to go a lot, and then I
Mhm.
cut back really because of budget reasons, and because at the time, to be honest with you, I was busier with my. I was working 2 jobs, and both of them were busy, and I had a little extra money, and at night I wanted to go to the movies, and then when business starts slowing down and you start tightening your belt up a little bit, going to the movies to watch a movie you've already seen before. um, that just stops being your priority,
Mhm.
and then it becomes something you do now and then. Like a lot of times I used to go when I was young. I used to go to the movies all the time because I live next to in walking distance of 3 theaters, so I could just walk out of my house, go up the street, and buy a ticket for $1.25 and watch Charles Bronson and Murphy's Law for an hour and a half, and then go home. So yeah, but there are people that are regulars at a lot of the revival houses. Like they are there for once or twice a week, and they catch everything, and it's fun. But I guess it can run into some bucks after a
Oh
while.
yeah, that's see, like at the moment the cinema chains here, flipping you it's an arm and a leg to go. And that's not even making a night of it. That's just going out to watch a movie and go out. If you even stay away from the concession stand, it's still a bit pricey on it.
Ooh, I
The
bought a
independent
hot dog.
cinema here is dire. It's really bad. Just
Uh,
it's very pretentious. Any of the festivals are very pretentious, and they're not really. It's only if you are sort of crowd,
the art
But
theater crowd,
yeah, and
yeah.
it's like, nah, I'm
That,
good.
that's a different animal, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were a bunch of art theaters in New York and a bunch of art theaters in Philadelphia, and they could be fun to go catch a movie that you just wouldn't see anywhere else. But there was a very strange theater called the Roxy in Philadelphia, and the Roxy would show double features of independent films, but they could be uh, like the rise and fall of Western civilization, part two, the Metal Years, and you would get Bad Lieutenant, or you would get Lensman, the animated movie. So that was a really cool theater, and they I don't know what happened to that, but they were a popular theater in the '90s and the '80s. I don't think they're in operation anymore. So that was kind of an alternative to the art house. It was in between. You had art house and grindhouse, and then you had this strange independent theater that had probably the only bookings for a lot of these movies in the city. Film Forum in New York was another one that
Hmm.
used to run some interesting bookings, Uh, but that stuff's here and there. Like you have now Fathom events and things like that might book a movie for 1 or 2 days in a multiplex on the weekdays. And there was one, I don't remember the name of the movie, but I was at the Lamley cinema in Beverly Hills, and they had a wall of independent films that were coming out. One was with John Travolta. It reminded me of Lone Star by the
Hmm.
John Sayles movie, and that might be one of only two theaters that play it. Mean Creek was a movie. I saw a great movie. Saw that like 20 years ago, and it was at one of these theaters that just carry atypical movies, and they had their crowd, and people like to go see them, and then you had a chance of catching these movies in a theater, and that's a different experience than watching it on Blu-ray. And I think they're more memorable when you see them in the theater because you're focused on on the movie.
Yeah, where
You're
you're
not,
back, you're paused, you're getting you're making a drink, you're
yeah.
making snacks, you're playing on your phone, and you try not to do it, but it's something about the whole environment. You're like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, it's just it's too many distractions. When you're in a movie theater, you're seeing it the way you're supposed to see it, and it's the proper it's the proper way to
Hmm.
enjoy a film, and it'll always be the proper way. So
Okay, I was in Cities of Red Door. It was the first time I've seen the movie theater actually full because all
mhm.
through the last couple of years I've been going in. Sometimes I'm like the only customer. I go watch a movie and I'm like it. But then part of me is going, I could live with this. I could live with having like nobody around me for like 10 rows. And then
Yeah, that's
I
what
get annoyed because one other person comes in. I'm like, oi, this is my screen. What are you doing?
yeah, I had the whole movie theater to myself for Terrifier because they re-released that a couple
Hmm.
couple couple weeks ago, the first movie, and I was like one
You really
person.
feel like king, don't you? You're like, yes, yes, play the movie there, Butler. No,
You can put your feet up; they're not going to chase you out.
yeah.
I remember when people would smoke cigarettes in the theater, they would drink beer in the theater, they would smoke weed in the theater, and you could hear you hear the beer bottles rolling down the aisle because it was on a slope. Um, that was usually on weekdays because the weekends the theater would be crowded. And then you go in on like a Wednesday night just to get out of the house. It'd be winter time, and the place would be empty, and you just have you just have people flopping in the movie theater. Maybe they got into an argument at home, and they said, "I'm going to the movies," and they would flop, and they would sit there with the cigarette, or they'd have the six pack or whatever. And sometimes they would get lit, and they would didn't like the movie. They start yelling at the at the screen or
Well,
complaining.
that's a very American thing anyway. I
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
seeing like first movie I think it was Alien versus Predator in an American theater, and the whooping and wooing and the cheering. I'm like, what the hell is this?
Oh,
And I'm like,
the what?
what? Oh, what the? And you're just like, this is not the proper way. What are you doing? I remember just being totally shocked.
The three,
And then I found out
no,
it was normal.
the two wildest, there was good wild and there was bad wild, but the two wildest experiences I ever had, was, and I tell people about when I saw Death Wish 3. I saw Death Wish 3 in a really beat up theater, South Philadelphia. The screen had duct tape. It was held together with duct tape. I don't know how the screen got torn. I'm going to assume it's because people throwing things at the screen, which was common. They didn't like the movie. The beer cans were flying towards the screen. And if they were not spending money to replace the screen, so they would put white duct tape on it. If they couldn't get white duct tape, black duct tape, and they'd paint it white. And this movie was sold out. And they treated this movie like a football game. I mean, they were cheering Bronson and booing the bad guys and yelling and screaming from beginning to end. I've never seen anything like it. And it was cool. It was cool because they were happy. They were happy with the movie. Sometimes you go there and they don't like the movie, or their enthusiasm turns to anger, and that happened. That's actually happened where they get so into the movie, but they might prefer the bad guy to the good guy, and the bad guy's losing. Now you got an angry audience, and sometimes that could, oh my God, they would get a little wild. But the bad wild, or I don't know if you call it good, bad, or just a force of nature, was when I saw the movie House. House was a forgotten movie, made a ton of money back in '85. It was William Catt from Greatest American Hero, and you had George Wendt from Cheers, and the theater was packed, and it was near sold out. A lot of kids, a lot of teenagers, a lot of rowdy teenagers, a lot of people just crashing out, um, and just they didn't shut up from the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie, and they were getting really stupid. Because like George, when George Wendt would show up on screen, everybody would be like screaming Norm, which is funny if you watch Cheers. If you didn't watch Cheers, for all you knew that this was somebody calling his friend Norm, and they would turn around and tell people to shut up, and words back and forth, and before people would get in each other's face. And I remember people throwing things, candy. They were throwing candy, like they would buy Mike and Ike's, which was it's like jelly beans. And you get a handful of it, and it's like a cluster bomb because you throw it, or like a shotgun, it disperses and it gets
Mm.
really wide. And by the 10 rows of handful of Mike and Ike's, now you got shrapnel jelly beans hitting everybody in the head. And I'm like, oh my God, this place could blow up, but yeah, there have been some crazy, but again, hey, you want to charge a 99 cent for a ticket? That's what you're going to get in the theater. You want, but yeah, that did not go on in the $7 theaters. They would throw you out. Although I've seen them try to throw people out, and the person didn't want to go out, and that another confrontation in the Aussie. Yeah, it was a different world in those days. Didn't have cell
Mm.
phones, no evidence. My word against yours. Hey, he hit me first. That's what used to go on back then.
And now everyone's got a
And,
camera in your face and fucking.
yeah,
It's funny
and of
because
course,
it hasn't promoted better behavior. It's the antagonism's still the same. In fact, I would argue people become more antagonistic because they want you to do something so they can stitch you up. You know,
yeah, yeah. I
and
mean, you're
I
always
think
going to
this
have.
I think this current culture is worse. Where at least if two people have a proper beef with each other, few punches, and it's usually done because you have to be really committed if you're going to throw hands over an issue. I mean, if you're going to go toe to toe with someone, especially for the chance you could lose, you have to be really committed to that. That you're being aggrieved. Where
people
today,
are all, People are always going to get into fights, and it's just in those days
people
it just
were
was.
were always finding a reason to follow with each other. It's just part of human nature.
I think that in 20 years ago, 30 years ago, people were a little bit more aggressive because you could get away with it. You weren't caught on camera, and that's why um, it certainly made it easier for petty theft because you didn't have all these security cameras everywhere, and in the theater when you walked in you weren't being recorded by a camera that you didn't have them recording your license plate and all that other stuff, like not that they're going to each car and recording the license plate, but they had, digital video cameras that are scanning or
Yeah, so it's easier to
capturing
investigate afterwards
the
and
parking lot.
narrow down to somebody.
And in those days, a lot of people would go into these theaters under the influence. They would continue their pursuit of being under the influence in the theater, and that would lead to some crazy stuff. Now, when I saw Oppenheimer, I laughed because now they serve beer and wine, and you can buy that at the concession stand. That would have never happened 30 years ago because it would have been insanity
Mm-hmm.
to get to serve anybody that goes into some of these theaters.
Well, I like
It's
cinema pubs. I think they're quite cool. You know, sit down, there's a wee table, you can have a bite and a beer and stuff.
Yeah, but the people who go to that stuff today were not crazy like the people 30 years
Mhm.
ago. If you were walking into a double feature of The Hills Have Eyes and Pieces, you were probably not the theater. It would be in the theater's best interest not to give these people alcohol. You know, just you know. I mean, unless you want your seats ripped up even more, or you want because there were riots that broke out in theaters in those days. Soldier Blue, they almost burned the theater down.
Well,
That was in New
that's not
Jersey.
really a UK thing, so it must have it's a bit over your side of the pond because that I don't know, maybe it just culturally just didn't happen over here. You might have the odd scuffle or something.
Uh,
Usually if somebody's talking, someone would chase them and that would start, but that that level just wasn't a thing.
what happened was the theaters fell into decay. Part of the reason the theaters fell into decay was some of the neighborhoods the theaters were in also were starting to suffer from economic and other blight. And a lot of these theaters became flop houses, which you still see today in LA. There are theaters in LA where people go in, they smoke meth. That's not a secret because I've seen it on the internet where people said, I was in this theater and everybody was smoking meth, and you would get more of these flop house theaters, some of which were very dangerous. But you would see more of that in the old days, mainly because there were more of these theaters. Um, when you went into like some of these theaters in Philly, you got rowdy crowds that were difficult to control. The people working at the theater were getting minimum wage. They're not going to go in there and act as bouncers.
God, no, it wouldn't
And
be worth it.
no, so when they start getting riled up and nobody's chasing them out or telling them, calm down, they're going to get a little worse. But I haven't seen it. I have not seen that in maybe 20 years, 25 years. Not that it doesn't happen, not that incidents don't happen, but that was a creature of pre 1990s second rundown theaters,
Mhm.
and even drive-ins too. You could have craziness at drive-ins, but it just was a different era. Like I said, before cell phones, people would really press their luck with what they could get away with. So, but yeah, that was the thing. Like when people talk about grindhouse movies and watching this, and, oh, I would love to go to a grindhouse. I'd be like, brother, you don't want to go to one. If I were you, I would stay out of a place like that.
Yeah, I think like over here it just became a term because, like I said, it's not wasn't really a cultural thing. We didn't have that over here, so it's like an
Yeah,
alien language. Grindhouse is that just a style of movie, not the actual like you've right. You've actually been quite informative in terms of American folk culture because that's completely
yeah. When
different.
when people say grindhouse today, they think of the movie. They
Yeah,
think of
that's
the
what I'm saying.
film.
They're thinking it's a filmatic style,
They
but not the
they don't think.
actual location. Yeah,
Yeah, they don't think of the theater
yeah, because I
because
wouldn't. That's what I'm saying. I would have. I never made the association because I've never experienced it. So,
like I said, I'm very careful with the word grindhouse because a lot of people throw that word around where it doesn't apply.
mhm.
The Times Square theaters were the official grindhouses. Um, any theater that was similar to those, such as like again in Philadelphia, the Eric's Place would be a theater that I would call a grindhouse. The Duke and Duchess would be a grindhouse. The Tyson Theater played a lot of the same movies, but I wouldn't call it a grindhouse. I would call it a second run theater, which is basically a theater that carried mainstream movies after they played in the big theaters at reduced ticket prices, and the
Hmm.
theater paid reduced rentals, where they played first runs of B movies like stuff from Canon or New World or whatever. And they weren't always scary theaters to go into. But they were dilapidated, and a lot of times they were empty. And sometimes you get some dudes sleeping off a 3-day drinking bender in the last row. You know what I'm saying? Here's my $4, and they'd sleep. They'd sleep through the movie, and then nobody would chase them out in between showings, and they'd sleep through the next movie. And why chase him out? He's good for a $4 ticket every week. So that was, but that was not the same thing as going to a dangerous a theater that had a almost a sense of menace to it,
Hmm.
where you would get hustlers in the theater, or you would get people uh, who were criminals, and they would hang in the theater. It was a safe place where they could hang. Some theaters, they would go to work at 2 a.m., and they would work all night doing whatever illicit things they do. So they would go into the theater at 1 o'clock, and that's where they would sleep, or that's where they'd hang out, or that's where they'd hide out. And that's a lost, long forgotten piece of cinema history, that
Hmm.
theater history,
And maybe
that was.
something people aren't terribly aware of.
No, you had to be there. You had to
Yeah.
be there. You had to see it.
Have you
You
thought
had to
about
see it.
documenting it?
The problem is a lot of the people, they passed away. A lot of the theaters are no longer there. You
Mm.
just got archival footage. Um, the people who are really knowledgeable about it, like I said, there's not that many of them, and some of them, like 42nd Street Pete Chiarella, he tells a lot of his stories. Um, but in terms of doing a documentary on it, well, there's a bunch of them already out there, and I question some of the people that they interview, because they're interviewing.
Or
Sometimes
not,
I
not
think
not so much a documentary as in film documentary, but a book about the Grindhouse era and what was involved. Using personal accounts.
maybe one day. Part of the reason I don't do it
It
is
sounds
people
like an
don't
interesting story
people
that,
don't
if it's
believe
not
it.
put down, could be lost.
It will be lost. So much is lost. I mean, I'm 51 years old. If I were 30 years old in 1972, that would make, if I were alive today, I would be 81. And people who were there 1965 to 1985, many of them have passed on.
Hmm.
Many of them, like, there, a lot of the stories they were told like the Bible. They were oral histories. So, you would go in and you'd see this lunacy in a theater, and then you tell all your friends, and then if it was a really crazy story, people would repeat it to their friends. So it was always these word of mouth, friend of a friend stories, and of course they got exaggerated over
Of
time.
course, because nobody wants to tell a boring story. Two people
Yeah,
becomes four people, becomes two gangs.
but
Turns into you, the only person not
a,
involved.
a lot of it I don't tell, because people don't wouldn't believe it. I put it, but they would say, well, he's making stuff up, and I would always say, if I were that creative to make stuff up, this would not be the book I'd be writing. I'd be writing a bestseller. you know. And other things are, by today's standards, would offend the hell out of people, and even just recounting it, it would probably shock the hell out of people. Some of the things that you've seen or heard. So I think it's just going to be like the Old West. People write about the Old West. They weren't there because they're not 220 years old.
Mhm.
So you're kind of left with reimagining what was, without any firsthand experience. And you might be able to paint a clear picture, but you weren't there, you didn't see it. Something's going to be missing. But who knows? Maybe one day I'll sit down and I'll actually write about some of this stuff. As I like some of this stuff I forget. Things will pop into my head I haven't thought of in 30 years. Like somebody will ask me about it, and then boom, something will just and I'll just remember. Oh my God, I remember I was in theater and I saw this, and then it'll disappear and I'll forget about it for another
Hmm.
10 or 15 years,
Yeah.
you know.
There may
But it
be
was
something
kind
like just interesting, even your own personal first-hand accounts. If you jot those down, you might be surprised where it takes you.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Sometimes,
Without getting too forensic about it, if that makes sense.
yeah. I mean, some things I like. I remember when you'd have like really exploitive horror movies, like when they would say no one under 17, not R-rated, no one under 17 admitted without parent, but no one under 17 admitted, period. Like a movie like Gates of Hell or even Reanimator.
Hmm.
And I remember a lot of theaters would not carry them. And the theaters that would carry them, they would have them. They really went for. They wanted everybody who was into that to know they had it, and you'd have the big marquee and the posters and the lobby cards and all this. And man, you see some weird people walking in and out those doors because those movies did not appeal to everybody, but the people that it did appeal to, they showed up. And I just sometimes being too young to get into the theater, and some of those movies to this day I won't watch them. They're just a little bit too over the top. But I used to sit there from across the street and I'd watch the people going in and saying to myself, "Oh my God, you like that stuff? Oh wow." You know, like a movie like Mother's Day. Oh my God, that's a garish movie. You know,
I
but
remember that one
yeah,
actually.
which one?
Mother's Day, I think I remember that one.
Yeah, the Mother's Day
Yeah.
had a true Mother's. I'm not even going to describe the advertisement in the newspapers because the advertisements for Mother's Day, oh my God, they were grotesque. And the newspapers carried them. They didn't even care. Uh, World was a different place in 1980. It's just, I don't want to say people didn't get offended. It sure as hell offended a lot of people and it shocked a lot of people. But, the attitude was who cares? We're making
It's
money.
like
Who
I'm not gonna.
cares?
Okay, yeah, I don't like that. I'm not gonna watch it. No, it seems to be
Yeah.
a personal. Everyone has a personal crusade. I don't like this. Get
Yeah.
rid of it.
Yeah, they
And
were always like that, and like I said, if it's making money, as long as it's not too much trouble than it's worth, you're not going to censor it. If they feel it's too much trouble than it's worth, or they're not going to make enough out of it, bye bye.
bye bye, it's gone. Right. Let's talk about your writing because we've kind of went on a whole whole uh, journey here of American cinema, which is actually very fascinating. It's amazing how a person can recount stuff and your life experience. It could be a story itself.
Yeah, like I said,
It's amazing how just being places can.
first of all, I just want to say I'm going to plug, you know, 42nd Street Pete Chiarella, his YouTube channel, his books,
Mhm.
his magazines. It will give you an insight into a world that is forgotten, and he tells it like it is. He ain't bullshitting you.
Mhm.
You know, he's not. So some of the things may be offensive, but you know what? He's just telling you what he saw. If you want to learn about that, that strange history of American cinema, you can check his stuff out.
All right, cool.
But
We'll do is I'll get the link off you after this, and I'll stick it in the comments if people
yeah,
want
but
to check that out.
I think I should plug my own stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about tragedy, man, because you've done something. I would put it in the vein of a musical concept album, but you've done it with an anthology. Would that be a fair description?
A musical concept. I never thought of it that way, but the fifth story is
Yeah, 'cause
basically
you're basically you're
they,
telling an overarching story, but you're
yeah.
telling it through short stories and an anthology. Because actually, one of the
Hmm.
first things you say, like, folks, read these in order, or else you're going to miss a beat.
Yeah, it's
So
a novel.
where did the idea start formulating to tell the story in that way?
You want the honest answer? I wanted to write a short story collection. I wanted to write short stories,
Hmm.
because I had spent 20 years doing fiction, nonfiction.
Hmm.
And I knew that as I was writing longer works, I knew that um, sometimes it's best to tackle something small to sharpen yourself. So I started writing shorter, not necessarily short stories, but novelettes, sci-fi fiction, and horror and all that.
Hmm.
And I knew that if I released a short story collection, it would be hard to market. And I said to myself, I can put a collection of 5 stories of varying length, and I could, if I put them into a something similar to an anthology film, that it would be easier to market and it would be easier to sell the book and the book's tagline and the book's premise rather than trying to sell short stories from an unknown author. So I kind of started wondering, well, what's a good premise for this? And I was walking down about early in the morning, 7 a.m., down Santa Monica Boulevard, and not a little sketchy, but it was quiet. It was desolate. It was like abandoned because nobody's up at 7 a.m. except for a handful of people. And you have all these black box theaters. And I was walking by, and that's kind of when I said, I might be able to do something with that. And then I passed a black box theater in another section of LA that was basically closed down. It went out of business. And I started thinking and thinking and thinking. I remembered many, many years ago when second run and third run theaters started to suffer from poor ticket sales, they would book live shows um, on weekdays or sometimes for the entire week. Because a lot of these theaters actually started out as stage theaters. Like some of the, like if you went to a theater in 1980, that theater might have been built in 1930, and it might have had vaudeville playing there. And then when vaudeville went out, they hung up a movie screen, and started
Is that
showing
where
movies.
you? Is that why you use the term theaters as opposed to cinema? Because that's sort of links to that initial use for a lot of the buildings.
They were always movie theaters to me. They were always, that's how they were advertised. It was movie listing, theater listing. That's how it was in the newspaper.
Hmm.
So that's how that got into my lexicon. Um, Cinema has a different meaning. Cinema, when people use the word cinema, they're usually talking about something of high quality, a film of high quality. So that you know, not that that's the actual meaning of the word, but that's just that's how certain vernaculars
Hmm.
uh, decipher it. So when I was writing, I started thinking about the premise, and I started thinking about actors, and I started thinking about improvisation, and I came upon that idea of actors going to an improv theater, rundown theater, and the performance of tragic improvisations would develop into horror movies. But really, what I wanted to capture with that is capture a lot of what I've been talking about. I said it in 1973. I put the setting in North Jersey, not New York, not Philadelphia, but in the shadow of those two big cities, because when I was quite young, I was a frequent traveler to Asbury Park, New Jersey, Long Branch, New Jersey, which were basically similar in terms of the urban blight that Times Square suffered, but just
Hmm.
not to the same degree or the same level. So I wanted to capture that 70s, 80s kind of, dystopian, not dystopian future, but a dystopian past. And I wanted that to be the backdrop, and I wanted the environment on the actors. And some of the stories, however, are not featuring people who are down and out. Some of them also delve into some of the higher society element of New York or New Jersey, like the people living, like some of the characters live in Long Island, and they had successful acting careers. They had successful professional careers, but they hit the skids at some point, and other characters were just down and out and never made it, and their stories kind of reflect their own tragic approach to their career. So in a way, it's transgressive, um, and I think I mean and it's they're horror stories. It's purely horror genre,
Hmm.
but it blends a few other things in there. Um, and beyond the movie, I mean, it's obvious that it has an influence from anthology films. But I was also a big reader of short story horror in the 80s. I remember some really great books put out by Jeff Gelb, edited by Jeff, and edited by Martin H. Greenberg and all that. I was a big fan of those. But before that, I was a huge fan of horror comics, especially when I was a little kid. And I really loved the DC comics, Ghosts, House of Mystery, Weird War Tales, and all that.
Hmm.
And, and those stories were outlandish. So a couple stories in Tragedy Man might be a little outlandish or wacky on the surface, but that's kind of that influence coming from the comic book era. Not just DC, but Marvel put out one, Warren Publishing, and
Hmm.
and
I was always a
gosh,
fan of Dark
Atlas.
Horse comics growing up because they would do the Elseworld series and they would take,
Oh yeah.
mix characters together, your traditional Batman v Dracula, my favorite trilogy of
hmm
books. Because
Batman
uh,
versus Predator.
yep, there's three of those. I remember got the first two. I think there's three of those in total, wasn't there?
They were good.
Yep.
Dark Horse did a phenomenal job with Conan. I mean, I wasn't even reading comic books, but that one I kept reading. That was really good. Yeah, Dark Horse did some cool stuff. I remember when they first came out too. They're this small little
Mhm.
independent trying to make a name for itself in a tough market. But yeah, but I just felt an anthology was the way to go, and I let the stories, some run short, some run long, some run really long, and I just let it carry itself out, and try to get it out there, try to raise awareness, which is, it's not easy to do when you're an indie author.
No,
Um,
that's what I was going to ask you. Like, especially social media. On one hand, we've got the greatest tool. Like, we can sit and do this from halfway across the world, and there's
mhm.
more opportunities for people to talk, get together, promote. You can get your stuff out there without having to like put out too much venture capital. But at the same time, it's more difficult than ever to actually get seen and get in touch with fans, potential fans, or the paying customer. How's your experience been with that?
Well,
As an independent author.
here's my concern, not as an independent author, but as a publisher, because
Hmm.
publishing is, producing the book, marketing it, and trying to get it sold. If 10,000 people today decided to self-publish online, 10,000 books would hit the online market within 24 hours. Whether they sell or not, it doesn't matter. Most of these online venues, they just take a percentage of the books if they sell. If they sell
Hmm.
100,000 copies,
Yeah,
fine.
because
If they don't
it's
sell,
data on a server until it
mhm,
gets produced.
yep. And what happens with it is that is an enormous amount of product flooding the market, and it becomes very difficult to stand out. And even if you do stand out, you have concerns about how much money your customers are willing to spend in a week, a year, a month, or whatever. So I think that you just need to be in it for the long haul until you become noticed almost as a brand. Now,
Hmm.
that's not my advice to anybody because I can't point to saying, well, that's what I did. Now I sell a million copies. I mean, I'm just starting out with it. I could shift gears, in 2 weeks to something different. But I think that if somebody invested a lot of time in their personal brand and didn't quit, I think that they might be able to move more product reasonably. I don't know how much you can sell. That depends on the audience that you're reaching and how engaged they are. I think that if you had a YouTube channel or a podcast that had a large audience and you self-sponsored, like if you had a, a library of 5 books that you could plug to your audience, you're probably going to, and they like you, they'll probably like your books, and they'll probably go with it. But that's another thing I want to point out too. I think you need a library. I think that you need to just keep doing, not rushing books out to the market,
Hmm.
but you just have to keep going, going, going. And then if you hit to the point where you start being well known and people like you and they like your current release, they'll go back and buy your old release. That's my attitude, because that was my attitude about Michael Crichton. I didn't know who he was. I had never read any of his books. I read Rising Sun. I thought it was phenomenal. I went out and I bought Disclosure. I thought that was great. And then I got pretty much every other book you wrote. So that happens with authors. It happens with musicians. It might be the 7th album that somebody put out, and you like it, and you go back, and then you get 1 through 6 over time.
Hmm.
So, but
Actually, it's funny enough because there's a band that's just popped up recently from the 90s. They're called Skindred,
uh-huh.
and it's a mix of metal and reggae.
Oh
And
wow,
it's doing an online TikTok thing at the moment. It's become a trend.
wow.
And these guys have been going, like I said, they've been going from the 90s. They're a Welsh band.
Hmm.
How's this for a mix? A Welsh band that mixes metal and reggae,
Hey, it works.
right? And now they've become they're doing Wembley in like the next month or so. In fact, I'm going to see if I can get
Yeah.
tickets and see what that is. But these
Sometimes
guys
it
have been
takes a
plugging
while.
away, just middle of the bottom tier. I'd actually forgotten about them, and everyone's acting as like
Yeah,
this is a brand new thing, and I'm like, what the hell? Fuck's sake, I remember them guys, and I remember that song. What the hell?
yeah.
You know.
So
And I saw an interview like,
sometimes
well,
that's what it
took us
takes.
20 years, but we got there, and I'm like, fair play to us. They never lost their passion. They do what they do because they love it. And that's what I
Yeah.
always talk about is people get so hung up, don't they? If I don't become an immediate success, I'm a failure, and they forget why they're doing what they're doing.
Well, I think the issue is that an indie author tries to duplicate the success or the marketing approach of a of a major publishing house, where they do a huge media push, and this push is coming from a publisher that everybody's heard of, that has all these distribution deals and has all these pre-purchase marketing. They might buy ad space for 5 years in advance at a discount in a particular
Yeah,
magazine, and the book comes out, and they want heavy sales that first week, and they hope that it carries over and becomes a bestseller. So they want to move a lot of copies that first week and build momentum, and then it tapers off. Sometimes you can have a book and an author that's so popular, they're going to keep selling. They're going to keep selling. Maybe not a lot, but they'll keep selling. But it's that big open. Indie authors, I don't know if you can have a big open. I think that it has to be a longer term, consistent approach to promoting your work and promoting yourself. Sometimes promoting the book or the library is not enough. Sometimes you have to promote yourself as well. Like Harlan Ellison was great with that. Harlan Ellison was fantastic behind the camera. When he would do interviews, he was very, very engaging, very, very, very fun. And then there's other authors who I think were phenomenal, but you put them behind a microphone, and they
well,
weren't going to.
I
You weren't.
get it. Like this podcast is a perfect example. Get people like yourself on, fantastic, and as I said even before we went live, and everyone knows that watches, this is a chat. It's not a get you moment or that sort of thing, or a structured, blah blah blah.
Hmm.
Every interview is different, and I don't even like using the word interview. That's why I call the segment chats because that's what it is.
Yeah,
Um, but you are a small percentage of the people who are reluctant to even come on and do this. There's a fear, and there's the seems to be particularly with writers. Filmmakers are a completely different breed of animal. You know what I mean? I can
yeah.
get that they come on, they've no problem there because their whole
They're
ethos, I
bullshit
think.
artists.
Yeah,
They're bullshit artists by nature. They they're not shy in front of a camera. They live for that.
yeah. So they're a
Uh,
completely different animal. That's but writers, I'm
yeah,
trying to convince you don't have to
writer.
come on here. It's just talk. Just let people see who you are, and sometimes that's even like you've told an absolutely fascinating story about just even your own personal history of going to the cinema, and
Yeah,
that's a hook. We're only spending now, the last bit actually talking about your product, and it hasn't been like a hard sell the whole thing, and to me
nah.
that gets audience members more engaged. How do you convince people that this is the way forward? Just just give a wee bit of yourself. That's all you have to do.
Well, in a way, what happened? Part of the reason is that because they're writing, they're not in front of a microphone, so they're in front of the computer writing, so they're not developing the experience in front of a camera, so they might be
Mhm.
a little shy about it. My answer to like, I'm gonna go back.
Well, how did you just what's your journey into being in front of the camera? Because you're very comfortable and it's been an easy conversation. Great, enjoyed it so far. So, what was your journey to get in front of the camera?
Oh, a couple things. Well, a long time ago, when I was in college, there was a professor in a drama class, and he liked my writing. He liked my essays. He thought they were really good, and he would call on me in class, and I would stumble. I couldn't articulate, and he pulled me aside. He said, "Look, if you can't talk, whatever you want to do in your career is not. You're going to have a ball and chain around your leg. You're going to be. Learn how to talk." He was an actor, so
Hmm.
that's maybe where he was coming from. So I said, "Okay, yeah," and I didn't really do anything in front of the camera. I had gotten into independent radio, and I was behind the microphone, and I couldn't even begin to tell you how awful, those first broadcasts were. I mean, I was monotone, I was dispassionate, and all that. And I would listen to them, and I say, "Oh boy, I gotta kick it up a little bit behind that camera, or rather behind that microphone." And as I got comfortable speaking, um, it wasn't a big deal to put a camera in front of me. Partially because I worked in television too, so I would sit next to producers when they did interviews, so I kind of
Hmm.
understood how an interview worked and all that, and I understood that it's not that big of a deal. It's just you just talk and but try to be engaging. Remember, you have an audience. You don't want to bore your audience, but it's comes down to practice. I mean, if you're not somebody who can who's ever done something like this before, I don't know if you want to go and do a hour and a half live stream, but you can go on TikTok and you could record a 10-second blurb about your favorite book and do 10 different takes. And if they're not that, if none of them are any good, do 11 and 12 and just put that up on TikTok. And in time, the next time you go, you probably will improve and maybe take 6 takes. And then after a while, you can do them live. But the bottom line is you just have to just get out there and you just have to do it. And I would advise people also to watch engaging people. Harlan Ellison again is fantastic as a guest. Gore Vidal he could be a little off-putting, but he had that kind of weird charm behind the camera. Um, Other people were just really good guests. I saw Paul Simon on the Dick Cavett show. And my
Hmm.
God, the poor guy couldn't talk, and he was shy, and he didn't say anything. And they put Charles Bronson on there, and Bronson for a half hour, it was like really incredible. I said, wow, I didn't know he was that engaging. But Paul Simon, by the way, is pretty darn good doing interviews today because now or rather in later years, because again, practice.
Yeah,
So
just you have to start
if you
somewhere.
yeah, if you have a few if you do a few interviews that tank, big deal. If they
Hmm.
don't come off the way you want them to come off, so what? If it's a 10 or 15 minute investment, if you don't want an hour and a half train wreck. I mean
Well,
that's
well, the thing is, just seeing you mentioned an hour and a half because obviously, I started these off as an hour, and it never stuck to it. We just conversation went on like this has, so I just said, okay, set aside an hour and a half because I've had some of these that went on for like 2 hours plus because that's just the way the conversation went, and I have no
yeah.
problem with that. If we're having a good time, why? Oh, right, we got to cut off right now. I'm not about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
that's the difference between a live stream as well. That you and thanks, chat, for not turning up, you bastards. No, all my regulars haven't turned up. I'm like, I told you I was hitting miss before we began, but that's just the way it evolved. Uh, not trying to be anything or do anything. I think there's once or twice it's went below, but that's just nature of the beast. Um,
Yeah.
one guess I had, we were completely uh, everything was going wrong that day. Things were going wrong with me. Things were going wrong with them, and by the time we both actually got to go in the stream an hour late, we're both knackered. Had no energy. I was just like, oh, but thanks. I was like, oh, thanks, mate, for at least we got it done, and we hadn't had to postpone again. You know, and it was no personality. Or it was not a bad interview. It was just life happened, which it does,
Yeah.
and still had a great chat. So it was less than an hour. So be it. It's all about just having the engagement and out there. But yeah, people do put this like massive. They make it into a massive hill to have to climb just
Hmm.
by getting on and talking to somebody, and that's good advice. And that's what we're always trying to do here. Just say people like, give it a go. We need more creators, not less. And it's not enough now just to do generic ad or make a post. People have to get like you said, your personal brand.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it could be beneficial. While you have to sell your books, you have to sell your movies because that's what people are buying. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, you have to sell yourself because you're going to have to do a lot of this stuff on your own. When you're involved in independent, any type of creative independent anything, where you don't have a business manager, you don't have an agent, and quite honestly, sometimes you're better off without them. And you don't have a publicity person, and you don't have anybody doing these things for you. You kind of have to do it yourself, and a lot of it is guerrilla marketing. You're going to have to go out there in person. You may have to go to a horror convention, and you may have to buy a table and then put your self-published books, and you might lose a lot of money that weekend, but you could get yourself out there and raise your awareness. And then you lost money, you got to come back in 6 months when they come back in 6 months. Um, if you're an independent creator and you think, well, the worst thing these guys can do is try to skip the. I don't don't take it 100% because there's obviously exceptions, but just based on what I've seen for years and years and years, the idea you're going to write a book, a screenplay, record music or whatever, and think that it's going to blow people away and you're going to get a publishing deal, you're going to get an agent, you're going to get this, you're going to get a big advance. It happens, but it's rare. Most people work their way up.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're working your way up, you're going to have to you're going to have to invest a lot of time. You're going to have to invest money. I know people have a limited budget, but at some point you're going to have to spend some money to get your name out there. And spending money could be anything from attending a social meetup at a hotel somewhere where it's independent author night, and then they're going to have $20 and you come in and you can hang out together and network. You have to get out there to build relationships, to build your profile, and you have to advertise, and you have to be consistent with it. If not, you're just going to fall behind so much other stuff that's out there. I mean, you're competing with everybody's discretionary income and their limited time. So just running an Amazon ad, and you should run Amazon ads. If you have a book on Amazon, you should be running ads.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't rely on that alone. If you want to build up a Facebook group with 1,000 followers, that's another plus. But you can't rely on that and your Amazon ads alone. You have to maximize within your budget and within your time to get out there and get the spotlight on you as best as you can. Um, you're going to hear the word no a lot. You're going to get blown off. I mean, I think Tragedy Man's a great book. I think that the people who've read it and have read the serialized version like it. They enjoy it. I mean, I'm so not everybody's going to like it, but I think the most of the people who read it really enjoyed it. Um, but it's not a book published by Doubleday, and I'm not a famous author. So when I send messages out, would you like to read the book? Would you like to review the book? would you be interested in booking me for a show? The overwhelming majority of them are, they're not even going to respond. They
Hmm.
don't need me. Do I get discouraged? No, as I expected. Because I don't expect a hundred
Do you think a
percent
lot of people take it personally
response.
because
Yes.
in the creating, because you're putting a bit, if you create something, you're putting a bit of yourself in there. There's no if buts or maybes. You're it's not just turn up to a 9 to 5 job where you just dial it in. If you're actually creating something, you're hurting yourself a little bit. Emotionally, or you're struggling maybe to get that particular phrase, the story not
Uh,
going quite the way you want. You are putting yourself in there. So when you're
I
told, "Nah, I'm not even interested in reading it," for example.
I'm wearing a different. They're not talking when I am booking, trying to book myself
Mm,
for a podcast. People see me as an author, but authors write. When I'm calling somebody about a podcast booking, that's not an author. That's a publicist. That's a business manager.
mhm.
That's a promotional person. I am in the capacity of a promoter or a publisher when I contact you. I'm a publicity person. I'm a PR person.
So you basically put the
And
other hat on,
yeah,
which I think
yeah,
people have difficulty doing. It's
and
understanding you have to put the author hat down and you have to stick on the promoter hat and you have to wear that for a bit and put the same energy as
yeah,
if you're creating.
yeah. Because if I'm trying to promote myself and get myself booked on a show or get a plug somewhere, and they turn me down, like if they don't respond to the email, I don't even remember I sent it because now 3 days later, every day I'm still contacting two people this day, three people the next day, four people. Then I get a message, who's that guy? Oh, okay, I remember him. I don't even think about it a lot of times because I don't expect 90% response. I expect nobody's going to get 90% response unless they I mean if I was selling if I were selling 100,000 books and I had a podcast with 50,000 listeners and I wanted to raise my awareness maybe in a new market. And I tell people I have 50,000 listeners. Well, yeah, they're gonna get back to me because they know I'm
Mhm.
going to mention it on my show to my 50,000 people who are going to follow to the other
Yeah, it's all
show.
reciprocal. It's about getting the word out and a
Yeah,
bit of that. But
that's it. But I'm not going to sit here and say and get mad at somebody for not getting back to me. I'm not going to get mad at somebody for not booking me. They might book me a year from now. You never know.
yeah, circumstances.
And these guys also get 1,000 emails a day, and they also get emails. People trying to get plugged. You know, uh, for free. And at the same time, these people the podcasters or whomever are trying to sell advertisement, and they might have guests already booked for the next 6 months. There's other things
Yeah,
that
because I
come
think
into play.
we book a month in advance.
Yeah,
Because we talked. I think it was was it the end of July, beginning of August.
yeah, it was about 5 weeks ago. Yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah.
was. Yeah, it
So,
was the end of July. I'm like, sorry, mate.
mhm.
August is you've no chance. But I don't want to book too far ahead because I know flipping real life has this sneaky habit of if you book too far
Yeah,
ahead, life's going to just jump in and you know get in the way because that's what it likes to do. But it
yeah,
was a case of, yeah, of course, but this is the circumstances. Are you okay with this? And then here we are, and it's all good.
yeah,
But it's just getting people to understand get rid
yeah.
of the
That's it.
barriers in your head. You have to let go of that, and like you say, wear a different hat. I
Yeah,
just I
I
just
mean,
think it's a shame. There's so much potential out there, and the people discourage themselves because they won't take that step.
it's lack of experience. I mean, lack of experience and not seeing it as a business venture, which is you have to do. And they, well, I'm an
Mm-hmm.
artist. I say, well, it's show business, not show artwork. Um, there's certain business steps you have to take, or else it ain't gonna fly. You know, one of the common mistakes I made when I did my first book, which was nonfiction, Universal Monsters. Um, the book's finished on October 1st. It goes to publishing on October 8th. So on October 2nd, hey, I'm done. Let me start getting this promoted. And then you find out that nobody can book you for 2 months because they don't book people with 5 days notice or 6 days notice. They're planned. Their shows are already planned
Yeah.
out. And then you have a cold release because the book's coming out and you're not even promoting it for 2 months later, and your sales are flat because there's no publicity. So finish for a book, if you want to release it on January 1st, 2024, get it done November 1st, 2023, and start getting those bookings done so that now you right away, so that your advanced reader copies go out. Although my advanced reader copy that actually went through 28 revisions. I just had a draft that I sent out because I was so busy. So that's why
I
I didn't send it
promise
to
you,
you.
I'm going to read it in full. I know I only skimmed,
Don't
and I have to apologize to everybody that sends me, especially digital copies. I need to get myself a better. One of them stupid Kindle Fab
uh,
habit. Never use it.
don't read the advanced reader copy. That was that was
Physical
that was
probably have more of a chance because
that
I can
was
take that with me
I was still
places.
editing. Get the finished one. That's the actual real version. But uh, um,
But what I've liked so far, like I said, I've obviously had to get a bit of a feel for it so I could talk to you. But and I
mhm.
like the concept. I like the idea. It's bringing her something refreshing to the anthology, sort of, because
Yeah.
a lot of them are really haphazard and one story, like they're all over the place. I find a lot of anthologies, and
Well,
it's
is it an anthology or is it a collection? If it's a collection, it can jump anywhere and
mhm.
everywhere. Even can even jump genres in some cases.
I think
But
people use the
to me,
same. That's the problem. They use the same term intermittently. So you get an anthology, you're expecting a theme, and then it just goes, and then by the time
antho-
you're like, oh god,
to me, when someone says anthology, I'm looking for a connection.
mhm,
You know, when they're disconnected, that's a collection. Now my opinion means nothing, but that's how I see it. So if I buy a short story collection, like say Martin Greenberg did one called Dracula. I can't remember the name of it. When the Francis Ford Coppola Dracula movie came out, he edited a short story collection of Dracula stories, which is really really good. Very 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 diverse writing styles, approaches. You had splatterpunk writers, you had gothic writers, you had all this, but it was a collection. It, the difference in tone didn't bug me. And also, when you finish a short story, you put a bookmark, you can put it down, pick it up 6 months later, and now you're reading another story, put it down,
mhm.
read it, pick it. An anthology, it's not a novel, but it doesn't even need to have a framework, although, I think a framework helps. Um, an anthology kind of has to be more connected. It has to have more of an overarching theme among it. I don't think the stories work well when they're disparate. And anthologies also could have longer stories and less volume, like a 13 story anthology. Is it an anthology? And that kind of sounds like a collection. That's a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
An anthology of 5 or 6. Like I used to like, maybe this influenced me a little bit inadvertently, but I used to like Robert E. Howard's Conan books, or rather the Ace publications, where they had other authors writing their own material and finishing unfinished works by Howard. You could get a story that was 30 pages, followed by something that was 100, followed by something that was 10, and then with something that was another 25. So they attempted to write them chronologically, loosely chronologically.
Mhm.
So you could open it up and you got a combination: short story, novella, novelette, novel. That I kind of went with Tragedy Man, because since it was connected as an anthology, it didn't. The stories could vary in length, and that's why I ended it with a novella.
Mhm.
I started out with two short stories, and then two novelettes, and then a novella. And I think that works well within an anthology framework. If I were to publish it as a 600-page short story collection and have the novella novelette and 15 or 10 short stories or flash fiction mixed in there, and you'd be like, what? Why am I? What's this 100-pager doing in the middle of the book?
Yeah, it becomes very disjointed and hard to. It's like
Yeah,
my second book, Tales of Horror and Madness. I class it as an anthology. It's only 6 stories, but they're all circus and sideshow themed. So
yeah,
every story is like within that framework of somebody's went to a circus, it's a sideshow, it's a particular act, and the stories, although the characters aren't related in each of the stories, it's within that. You know what you're getting.
yeah,
Where
yeah.
say if I threw in a tale and it was nothing to do with it, then just completely destroy that piece of work.
Yeah, you're coming in with expectations. I think when somebody buys a short story collection, they want short. They don't want
Mhm.
a novella. They don't want a novelette. I would pick up a short story collection, and even if it would be a good story, but if I started reading the story and then you would get Roman numeral 2 dot and then another 6 pages and Roman numeral dot 3, I don't know if that belongs in a short story collection because it's not short.
Mhm.
Um, Not that they were bad or not that uh,
No, but you're back to your saying about marketing and potential. But no, you're marketing a product. People expect something.
mhm.
So the minute you don't want to use that term, severe expectation, the minute you remove that expectation or you do something, you throw a spanner in the works, you
You're not
lose
giving
the.
you're not giving them what you sold them. You're giving them something different, and that leads to a lot of
You get resentment. You'd actually get hurt your personal brand because you've effectively lied to the audience, and
yeah. Well, you get, but they go here that you'll see the numbers DNF did not finish. That's what you end up with. You
mm,
end up with a book where they started reading. Well, this isn't what I wanted, and then they don't they put it aside. So that's why excuse me, I'm losing my voice. That's why
no,
it's
no, go with it.
important. That's why it's important to think some of these things through from a marketing perspective too. If you have 100 short stories that you haven't published, um, don't just, and you want to publish a short story collection of 12 stories, don't just pull 12 random. Like, really think about it, you know, and just don't think about the themes and the plot, but also look at the length of the stories and the pace of the stories, you know. Um, do you want to mix a gothic story up with a splatterpunk story? I don't know.
Mhm.
Sometimes, what audience are you going for? You know what I'm saying? So sometimes you have to think about who you're
I think this
targeting
is
this
back to
with.
your original thought of it's a long term. Don't think in the short
Yeah,
term. Think long term.
dude, dude, got to be long term. You got to be in it for the long haul. I went into this. People might shake their head when I say this, but one of the things that motivated me to get into print publishing and as opposed to doing podcasting, like fiction podcasting, radio
Mhm.
theater, or pursuing production work and film. Not that I don't want to pursue any of that stuff, but it's just uh, not the only thing I was thinking about. I wanted to publish books, novels, nonfiction, this and that. I had a 10-year plan, still have a 10-year plan. If in 10 years, and I have 10 books or 12 books, and I'm established, and I'm selling these books, not a lot, but if I could make a supplemental income from a library that would carry into some passive income in my retirement, I said to myself, that's an idea because as you get older, you can't work as much. And to be honest with you, like I said, I've been a professional writer for, I don't even remember, it might have been 2007 I started. And I was a ghostwriter for bloggers and for internet marketers, and I would edit ebooks. And an ebook 14 years ago was not the same as an ebook today. You paid somebody with I don't even know if PayPal was around. However, you purchased it with a credit card or whatever off a website, and they emailed you a PDF. That's how a lot of ebooks were made. Sometimes they would be copy protected, and they would send you a password, and you'd read it on your laptop. This is even pre-smartphone. And the pay was not great. The demand was enormous because this was Internet 2.0,
Hmm.
and there was a lot of demand for people building websites and building blogs to get into this internet marketing thing. eBay was relatively new. Amazon, I think at the time, very early stage, was only selling books.
I gotta remember. I remember. I'm like, I'm sitting
Yeah,
nodding, going to remember all this, like early 2000s, mid
yeah.
fucking
I've
world
been
was
doing that.
changing.
I've been doing that work for a long time, and I don't think I'll be doing it for a long time or much longer because artificial intelligence is taking that type of work away. Not to say that uh, it may wipe it out completely, but it is definitely taking a chunk out of that type of work.
Hmm.
So, I started thinking about um, a different venue. So that's one of the reasons why I got into publishing and publishing books and writing. I mean, literally, like uh, I'm a big fan of EC Comics, and EC Comics had a horror story that used the old saying "strictly from hunger," like strictly for younger people. That's an old, outdated expression. Strictly from hunger means you're only doing something to put food on your table. It's like I
Hmm.
did this for the money because I need the money, and I actually started looking at self-publishing as a way to replace the nonfiction work that I think that's going to become scarce. And I'm lucky enough that I'm 51. I'm not 71. Stuck with, oh my God, like what do I do? So I started looking more at digital and social media. I've been plugging away with social media for 6, 7 months. I've never cracked the code on how to get followers. Maybe one day I will. Um,
It's I'm still figuring it out too, so don't worry about it. Still so hit and miss.
I think it's one person here, one person there, one person here, one person there, and as the numbers grow, the shares grow, and the followers will grow. But again, that's a long-term plan.
Yeah,
That's
I'm so lucky over the 3 years doing this particular. This is my first podcast, by the way, but over 3 years doing this one, I have some real, wouldn't say follow friends. You know, on each of the platforms, I see them all the time. They're liking, they're sharing, and I'm eternally grateful for them. And
yeah,
it's built up. It started off with one person. I've got like two or three people on each platform, and that's all it takes. And I just every time I just see them the names pop up, I'm like, oh, thanks very much. I'm glad you support me. If that makes sense. I'll never
yeah.
forget. It doesn't matter how many supporters you get in the future. Like those handful of people that are supporting me now, I'll always be grateful for. It's
Horror has a grassroots community that can be very generous, but generosity has its limitations. There's only so many hours a week that people have to listen to podcasts, and only so many hours, so much money they have to spend on books or DVDs. But it's enthusiastic, and you just have to, like I said, you just got to keep at it and keep raising awareness. And you also got to know when to shift gears. If things are not working, maybe you need a different marketing strategy. Like maybe if you're spending all this money, like if you're an author and you're spending all this money on Facebook ads and you're not getting a return, um, maybe you need a different ad,
mhm.
something that looks different. Maybe you need a different tagline. Maybe running a copy of your book cover is not necessarily running your book cover by itself. Maybe you need to redesign it to where you got the book cover and a couple other images or something, or a tagline or whatever. So sometimes you have to shift gears and change it. And you just got to keep at it. You just got to
Yeah.
keep at it, keep finding what works, and keep raising awareness. I mean, that's about as simple. That's a simplistic approach to it. But I don't think there's a complex approach. If there was, people would
We'd
sell
all
it
be
to
doing it, wouldn't we? That'd be easy. Tony, that's been
it
absolutely
would be
fascinating.
expensive.
Yeah, as well, because the house always wins. As I say, Facebook will always win, Amazon will always win. You're just trying to get a wee bit of
Yeah.
a
And I think I forgot to mention that you can get Tragedy Man on Amazon. It's exclusive to Amazon right now.
links in the description.
Oh, great. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I didn't open it wide. I didn't open it on other platforms. I wanted to keep it simple. But yeah, you can get that on Amazon. And you can follow me, Tony M. Caro, on TikTok, at Tony M. Caro. And TikTok is probably where you want to go. And actually, I have more than one channel. And maybe I should mention that on my main channel. Or Twitter, at Tony M. Caro. That's
Mhm.
where I kind of post a lot of things. If you
All
want to
right, cool.
follow me and keep up.
We'll do. We'll gather all that, and I'll do a pinned comment as well for the ones that I haven't already got in the description, because I've got your horrornews.net page on the description as well for people to check out some great thoughts and insights in horror movies. But Tony, I could keep you here for hours, mate. Honestly, but I'll release
I'd
you
like
back
to,
wild.
yeah, I'd love to stay for hours, but because then I don't have to work. I don't have to take the garbage out. I don't have to do all these other things I gotta
I know,
do.
pesky life. It's
Yeah.
funny to do one, but most important question: what's next down the pipeline? What have you got cooking?
I definitely am going to release a short story collection of my short stories in about 6 months or so, maybe a little longer. But the two major projects is a nonfiction book on Charles Bronson movies,
Mm-hmm.
very similar in style to what I do for HorrorNews.net, but focusing on Bronson and his movies. I did not get into the serialized platform on Amazon, Amazon Bella, which is where I start my work. I have a science fiction, I actually have two science fiction series that I'm working on there. They're not going to be finished for a while, so they might not come out for a couple hours. So I think the short story book, couple hours, couple of years, I mean to say. Um,
You
I
might
wish I
surprise
could
yourself,
crank
like,
them out
oh,
that
right,
fast. Yeah,
get enough caffeine on board. Boom.
but look for a short. Oh, you know what I forgot to mention because it's in the experimental stage. I am going to be doing fiction on TikTok. I am going to write very short fiction, as in 3 minute, 4 minute fiction, flash fiction
Like
with,
campfire type stories.
yep, but a little bit different in the sense that I'm thinking of them like those comic books I mentioned, like
Mm-hmm.
a 4 or 5 page. Like if I wrote this as a comic book story, not a full, like not a 32-page book, but like 5 or 6 pages in an anthology. And I've been working on AI with watercolor and photo art, and essentially plotting it. I always been doing it like the Marvel method, the old 1960s Marvel method. I'll come up
Mm-hmm.
with a plot or the story, and then I'll make like 5 or 6 images, and then I'll script it to the images that will play on a slideshow. I have not released anything on that because I haven't finished anything on that, but that's something I've been thinking about doing, and not thinking about doing. I am doing it. It's just not finished, and it will be
Mm-hmm.
finished soon. And I think I'd like to do one of those a month, maybe more, on TikTok and YouTube. Release them on YouTube. So that's my thing. I got a short story, Charles Bronson, and some fiction on TikTok, and then I kind of muse a little bit on TikTok about movies, books, and stuff like that. So keep people updated on that on Twitter
Fantastic.
and on my TikTok.
All right, folks, there you go. Tony, once again, thanks very much. This has been absolutely fascinating. I've spent most of this just going, listening to your stories, just riveted and just.
I have toned down a lot of these stories. One of these days, I might release a posthumous. One of these days, like
I
maybe
think you should
posthumously.
honestly. Just start off with your own accounts. Honestly, just tell them, and then see where it goes from there. And I don't know. That's a whole era thing. It's a foreign thing, obviously, that I'm not familiar with, and it's just
Yeah,
a tale needs to be told. That's people need to know about these sort of stories
it's
and the
a
way things were.
it's just a time, and like I was on a Steve Jervis podcast, and I remember mentioning him to him. Some things you just had to be there. Like I have yet to really delve into the VHS days when the video stores first started opening, and they got glutted with all this old horror stuff and new horror stuff. And today you got a lot of youngsters, young people spending a lot of money. They're collecting these old classic VHS
Mm-hmm.
thing made by Wizard and all these other companies, and that's cool. And I'm glad they dig it. But boy, was it different to walk into those stores and see all this exploitation stuff on the rack that was not sold as anything collector this or that. No, this was
No,
just
no, it was just. Don't forget, I'm I'm of a similar
it's
age. You know what I mean? I was there myself.
it's
Fun
just there,
times. Yep.
and younger people don't know that. Like they don't see it beyond a collectible, like a collectible Blu-ray. But at one time, it was just entertainment.
Hmm.
And some days you get a, some days you were into the latest Stallone movie, and other days you would get a very poor quality copy of a Paul Naschy movie that just happened to show up on the shelf. So that was, yeah, but it's forgotten. It's forgotten. A lot of people just I don't want to say it's forgotten. A lot of people talk about it, but as the years go on,
Yeah,
it becomes
it's going to go.
history, secondhand history. But yeah, yep,
Yep, fun times. But once again, Tony, thank you very much. Absolute pleasure.
anytime.
Folks,
Oh
make
yeah,
sure keep up with Tony and his works. The additional links I'll put in the pinned comment, but obviously what I've got in the description. Tragedy Man, pick it up. Interesting premise. I'm looking forward to the. I've only skimmed over it, but what I've seen so far, I really like. I'm looking forward to getting deeper into it. I might do a review at some point. Um, but as usual, we're busy as always, so keep up to date with the channel. Do the typey clicky things. And until next time, keep it creepy, keep it horrific.